This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Welcome to the AIPIS show for accredited income property investment specialists and those who aspire to be. If you're a real estate, mortgage, or financial professional, this is the place for you. We'll explore innovative investment analysis, sales, marketing, and income-generating strategies for the most historically proven wealth creator, income property. Learn from the experts as they show you how to build a better business and a better life.
It's my pleasure to welcome Adam Robinson. He is co-founder of the Princeton Review. He's author of 13 books, and he works as a global macro advisor of some of the world's largest hedge funds through his company Robinson Global Strategies, where he is founder and president. Some of his books, a couple of them I like, Warren and Charlie's Bedtime Stories, obviously about Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. And another great title is How Not to Be Stupid. Those are really good. Adam, welcome. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Jason. I'm thrilled to be on. I'm great.
It's good to have you. So you are a New York City resident, but you are in Hollywood right now, right?
I am. I'm in West Hollywood. I live in Tribeca, where I've been for eons. Yeah. And I left mid-March seeing the writing on the wall. Yeah. And most of my friends have, in fact, left. Anyone who can leave Manhattan has left.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. You know, I interviewed Dottie Herman, the CEO of Douglas Elliman Real Estate, on the show a couple weeks ago. And it was amazing to me, Adam, how candid she was, because she was saying a lot of things that are not in her self-interest. And, you know, she and all of her friends that, you know, have homes there have fled to the Hamptons. And she just said there's going to be a mass migration out of all high density areas, you know, not just New York City, but what's going to happen to San Francisco? I mean, even where you are, downtown LA, you know, West Hollywood. I mean, those are high density areas. Seattle, San Diego, Chicago, Miami, Boston, et cetera, et cetera. I just think even after this is over, and it will not go forever, that people are still going to be paranoid. They're going to have a sense of post-traumatic stress disorder. Do you feel the same way?
Well, first, I don't deal in feelings. I only deal with what I know to be true. And already the trends were in place, as you well know, before COVID. So last year in Manhattan, and just so your listeners get a framework on this, a benchmark, Manhattan commercial real estate is one of the prime retail destinations in the world, right? So you could say Paris, London, Rome, Singapore, Shanghai, Dubai, Sao Paulo, maybe a few other places, Miami, Chicago, LA. Anyway, last year, retail storefront space, 25 to 30% was vacant in Manhattan. That was at the end of last year, before any COVID. Imagine what it's like now.
Yeah, that's right.
And in addition, the already millennials and Gen Zs have been migrating away from high-cost large cities. And these were trends in place, again, as you well know, before COVID.
Sure.
And so coronavirus has accelerated trends that were largely in place.
Yeah.
And so, yes, this is going to be a long time coming. And even friends that I know have moved out of the city, as it were, you know, I'm using air quotes, for the summer, are expressing reservations whether they want to go back at all. Like even not millennials and Gen Zs, but people actually in the prime of their lives and wealthy enough to live anywhere in the world are saying, I don't know that I want to go back to Manhattan.
Yeah, or Hong Kong, or Singapore, or Dubai, or any of those places for that matter.
Any of those places.
Yeah, the two, in my eyes, Adam, the two big danger zones are elevators and mass transit. But, you know, when you live in a city, everywhere you go is crowded. You go to Starbucks, it's crowded. You walk on the street, it's crowded. You know, it's just everywhere. And so it's really kind of fascinating and tragic at the same time to witness these trends and think how life is going to be shaped maybe for an entire generation. I can see this
sure.
lasting for a long time. So it's pretty interesting. But let's talk about the economy. What you do is you must have just an amazing view of the global economy. I love macro. I'm a big macro fan, but you're in the thick of it. I mean, you're talking to the people who have skin in the game. They've got many, many millions, if not billions and billions of dollars at stake. So what are you seeing? What are you saying to them? And what can we all learn from it?
So first, global macro, in a world in which your listeners are thinking, what about my portfolio here in the States or my real estate portfolio or anything? The things that I'm about to say are true across the board, and then we can get granular. So in a sense, what's gone on is a collapse in the global economy that happens periodically. And, Sir John Templeton, the legendary investor, once said, the four most dangerous words in investing are, this time is different.
I say that all the time. I know that's such a great line. But
great line.
It really does seem like it's different this time.
Well, I was about to say.
Yeah.
I was about to say they're the most dangerous words unless this time truly is different.
Right. Okay.
And
fair
this
enough.
time is profoundly different.
Yeah.
Profoundly different in a way that it doesn't seem our central bankers or global leaders, corporate or political. And by the way, I'm agnostic. I'm not making any political statements here. But what they don't get is that we have a population collapse. So let me tie that to the economy. So it doesn't so the engine of the global economy since at least the end of World War II has been the willingness of the U.S. consumer to go into debt to buy things he didn't really need. And we call that the American dream.
Right.
And so I want what mom and dad had. I just want more of it. So if they had an apartment, I want a home. If they had a home, I want two homes. In fact, I want two of everything. And we exported that American dream that became a global dream, one of consumerism and debt. Debt fuels consumerism. And I'm saying all this because the punchline is going to come in about 2 or 3 minutes. And I'm giving your listeners a framework for understanding what's going on in the world. And so in their neighborhoods even. So again, willingness to go into debt to buy things I don't really need. And that works, I'm using air quotes, as long as we've got continued growth. So the entire world, the entire global economy was predicated on continued growth. We can't stop. We got to keep growing. Because every time we piled up a little more debt, we spent it, we grew and piled up more debt. We never paid down the old debt. And here's the problem. There are only two sources of growth in the world, population growth and consumption growth. Again, population growth and consumption growth. And again, the entire global economy was predicated, that's got to go on forever, truly forever. And here's the problem. They've both gone negative and are accelerating to the downside. So fact, in the United States, in every country in Europe, Canada, Australia, and Japan, I'm using air quotes, the developed countries in the world, all last year, more people died in those countries than were born.
This is the UN projection of the empty planet. All the environmentalists are so concerned about overpopulation, but just wait 5 decades. In 50 years, the planet's going to look empty. Japan and Russia will almost cease to exist. You can't have a country if you don't have people.
Well,
it's
right. But let's tie it back, Jason, to the reality today, not 50 years from now.
Sure, yeah.
So right now, because I know your listeners are like, okay, well, how does that affect my portfolio now? And so the problem is that, again, that wasn't just last year. This is an accelerating decline in birth rates. Again, in all developed countries, the only regions of the world that are increasing in population are Africa and the Middle East. And unfortunately, it would take, 20 or 30 people in those regions to equal the buying power, disposable income of one person in a developed country.
Right.
And so what's happened is we've piled up all this debt, assuming that we were going to keep growing, and now we're accelerating to the downside. And every X years, we have a bubble pop. And that bubble pop was because it was predicated on continued growth, the global economy, the debt. And here's the punchline. So we had, collapses in 74, in 80, 82, 87, 94, 2000, 2007, and 9. And we had a sharp one in 2018. We recovered, and then another one right now. And this is the fastest decline on February 19th, U.S. stock market at all-time high. And exactly 4 weeks later, on March 23rd, U.S. large cap equities had fallen by a third. I say large cap because the average small cap was down nearly 50% in a month.
Right.
Imagine the wipeout in global wealth there.
Yeah.
And so this was all predictable. As of a couple of years ago, we already had negative interest rates. Already, that should have told people, wait a second, we're Alice in Wonderland territory here. Jason, last year on November 6th, Ray Dalio, who's the head of Bridgewater, the world's largest hedge fund, on November 6th, he wrote a blog piece, "The world has gone mad and the system is broken." Well, it actually hasn't gone mad. This is all an inevitable consequence of debt piled up in a world that's now collapsing population-wise. You can print as much money as you want. It's not going to stimulate demand when there are fewer people buying fewer things. That's the problem.
Right. But I always wonder about that. If you just create so much money and it flows into the system,
it's got to go somewhere.
I know, it's got to go somewhere, right? So if everybody got a check, instead of it being $1,200 per adult and $500 per kid, if everybody got a check for $100,000, even with a declining population, even with wary consumers, how can we say that wouldn't create demand? Of course it would. And then those dollars would start chasing the limited supply of goods and services.
Well, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Let's talk about that. Let's actually play through that scenario.
Okay, go for it.
So economists, we actually know that doesn't happen. Central bankers have flooded the world with trillions of dollars.
Sure. And are you referring to global great financial crisis? Yeah. 2007.
Yeah. We flooded the world with trillions of dollars, and there hasn't been inflation. And there hasn't been inflation because if you give me $100 or $100,000 and I don't want to spend it on anything, there's no inflation. And so where the inflation has gone is real obvious. It's gone on in the stock market.
Yeah, or to assets in general, real estate, stocks. Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, by the way, that's true just within the U.S.
Yeah.
That's not true globally. It may surprise people to know that the global stock market peaked I say global, outside the U.S. So stocks outside the U.S.
non-U.S.
peaked in October 2007, almost 13 years ago. Global stocks outside the U.S. are roughly 60% of where they were 13 years ago.
Yeah,
you gotta let that land.
I think one particular person who makes a big splash in the media ought to be eating his shoe, and that's Peter Schiff, because he's just wrong so much. He's been touting international stocks forever. He's been saying gold's going to be $5,000 an ounce. He's been saying inflation, dollar collapse, and none of it has come true. And decoupling of China from the U.S., the complete opposite happened.
Well, we're decoupling now. I mean,
that's a different kind of decoupling, though. That's a decoupling based partially on the trade war and certainly on the pandemic, because there's more onshoring now because nobody wants to be left without supplies next time around. So that's a different thing. But let me ask you about a couple things you said, because you said some really interesting things there, and I just want to make sure we touch on them. First of all, I know you were speaking with somewhat of a figure of speech sometimes to say that there's no inflation inflation is not completely accurate. There is some inflation. It's just not much compared to the trillions of dollars that have been created, right?
Yes.
But, to be fair, on balance, certainly healthcare has gone up in price. Groceries are at a 50-year high. They just released that a couple days ago. We just found that out. Asset inflation, which you did say, in U.S.-based stocks have obviously gone through the roof. And also, you didn't mention it, but real estate, we had a lot of real estate inflation because when you have a bunch of cheap money, what are people going to do? They buy a house on a payment, not a price. Who cares what the price is? They care what the payment is. And college tuition's been a complete ripoff forever. And that's thankfully, I think, going to change. And so there's been inflation in those categories. But the other question is to say central bankers can't create inflation by creating a bunch of fiat money. I would just ask, I think you're right. There hasn't been much compared to the money creation. But compared to what? There might have been a ton of deflation had they not created all that new money. So comparatively to the deflation that would have occurred had the money creation not happened. Is that a fair way to look at it, the relative concept?
So there, you said a lot there. So let's actually back up and say we don't care actually about inflation. What we care about, which by the way is better than deflation, but what we care about is economic activity. And that's what we haven't seen a lot of. The velocity of money has collapsed.
Yes, and velocity, and that's important because velocity is inflationary. So that has really slowed. Go ahead.
So here's the question that's very easy to answer in terms of Sir John Templeton's dangerous to say this time is different. It's really obvious. We have negative interest rates. And you've got to people have to let that sink in what that means. So, for example, in Denmark, you wanted a home last year and you went to the bank and you asked for a mortgage, the bank would be thrilled and they would pay you to take the mortgage. Negative interest rates means that borrowers are paid to borrow.
Well,
lenders...
And you know what's so funny about that? It's so weird for any of us to relate to that idea. It's just so weird because we've all been conditioned to believe that it goes the other way. If you take someone's money, you have to pay them for the privilege of using it. And the longer you take it, the more you have to pay because there's inflation risk built in. But there's an opportunity cost for the lender, obviously. But if you look at it more like the simple concept of self-storage, or a safe deposit box, if you have a bunch of gold and you want to go stick it in a safe deposit box, you got to pay to rent the safe deposit box. It's like the bank is paying you to store their money, and if you want them to store your money, you got to pay them. It's negative interest rates. It's weird.
Right. The thing is, my money is usually in bits of information.
Right.
It's not, there's no storage like the bank. I understand the gold, you got to have armed guards and you got to keep it away from people who would physically carry it away. And so you're exactly right. It does have that analog, but we are in a world. It's again, what people, they go, oh, that's strange. That's really weird. Negative interest rates. And really it doesn't matter why that's so. The key conclusion of it is if we have negative interest rates, then all old models of the world are out the window. Because in traditional economics, we all studied economics in school, you've got to pay to borrow money. Right. That there's the time value of money, plus the risk involved, and all that. And that's out the window right now.
Right.
And if that's out the window, what else is out the window, right? Financial modeling and the whole notion of, here's a way to think about it. With negative interest rates, you're paid to own gold. You're paid to own gold. And there's so many other weird things that are going on in the world, which, again, don't get caught up in the weirdness of it. I'm saying this to your listeners, but what that's telling us is that the world is way different than we think.
Right.
And we have to re-examine all our assumptions. So, for example, as you well have stated in your shows, real estate, you can't think of real estate generically. You have to devil's in the details.
Right.
And so what kind of real estate, and you've gone at length on this, is so great, is what kind of real estate prospers in this new world? and which, commercial real estate in large cities. That's not a good thing.
No.
And right? Yeah. And certain other things, if we look at the demographic trends in place, and they were in place before COVID, you want to be on the right side of those trends, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'll give you an example of a related trend that was in place before COVID that's just been accelerated. It'll seem off the point, but it won't. The sale of pets and plants.
Yeah. Company.
Was huge.
Yeah.
Right? Comfort and loneliness.
Right.
And stay at home. Those trends were massively in place before COVID. And COVID has just accelerated that.
COVID has accelerated almost everything except the velocity of money.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. It's really important for your listeners. One of the key things is don't fight things that don't make sense. Get on board. Whatever the powerful tsunami is moving through the world right now, get on board it. Identify the trends that are in place, ideally before COVID, and COVID's just accelerated them.
Right.
And get on the right side of that.
Yep.
With your investment portfolio, your stock portfolio, or even, you're an entrepreneur. Yeah. Get on the right side of what's going on in the world.
COVID has created some big tidal waves, and you need to figure out how to surf them, because they could lead to prosperity, or if you miss that wave, economic tragedy. And, it's sad because I think the wealth gap is going to grow dramatically out of this. It's just going to get bigger, the income disparity and wealth disparities that so many have talked about.
Yes, indeed. Again, during the 2007-2009 collapse, and again, a predictable collapse, because we piled up debt assuming that we're going to keep growing, but we're not growing. So the central bankers keep trying to do whatever they can to keep the game afloat, which is keep lowering interest rates and keep flooding the market with money. So where that money has gone, it's flooded into stock buyback, right? Into Wall Street stock buyback and other large, you'd have to have a fair amount of wealth to be able to participate in those things. And then you did very well indeed. If you own stocks, especially if you had stock options, you did extraordinarily well in the last decade. Meanwhile, the average family, this is shocking. I don't know that your listeners know facts like this, Jason. At the end of last year, the average 48% of American adults, I say average, but really 48% of American adults had $0 in their bank account.
Wow.
Zero as in nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. No savings.
Yeah.
And another 21%, so you add the two, 69%, another 21% had some money, but less than $1,000, and had maxed out on all their credit cards. Yeah. I'm leaving the credit card debt aside, or the student loan debt and all that. So at a time at the end of last year, before COVID, with the U.S. economy at record unemployment lows and the stock market at record highs and the market flooded with money, American citizens, over 2/3, had less than $1,000 in cash to spend. And imagine what that was before COVID. Imagine that I presumably have already gone through that money.
Right. Yeah. In some ways, people are saving money in the COVID era because they're just at home. I'm saving a ton of money. Compared to my normal life. But yeah, no, it's sadly a very unequal distribution. The digital divide is really showing itself. Information workers have been able to maintain their income mostly during this time. But if you're doing a labor-oriented job, in a service industry, probably not in most cases. Hospitality's been devastated, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of the environmentalists would talk about how this, I agree, even though I don't agree with the way environmentalism has been so politicized and a lot of untruths have been told since then. But conceptually, this concept is interesting. This whole world built on consumption. And, if you look back to the time before the 20s, okay, and I don't know if you know who like Edward Bernays is, and he's
of course I know Bernays.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Right.
Okay, so he created modern advertising, modern public relations, and so forth. And Americans were a pretty frugal bunch, and in all the time before that, so far as I can tell, frugality was like a virtue, and it was something that was you were considered of good character to be frugal. Now, at least maybe recent events are changing that, but now you're considered a cheapskate and no fun. And, it's been all about bling and showy cars and whatever, everything we could consume. We can't have a system that's based on just radical consumption forever. That is a losing battle, isn't it?
It's such a losing battle, and I'm going to give your listeners a framework for understanding really anything human. And that is the notion of question and answer. And I'm going to get back to consumption in a sec.
Okay.
So everything human is an answer to one or more questions. So, for example, the coffee that I'm sipping is an answer to a question: what can I drink that will satisfy my thirst and give me a little late afternoon pep? Coffee. This podcast is an answer to questions your listeners have. Where can I go for world-class information on topics of a financial nature, curated by someone I trust? It would be your podcast, right? Is an answer. Your podcast would not be an answer for someone seeking what hairstyles are prominent or how to cook a chicken, right? You would not go you would not be an answer for that question. And so I say that because even marriage is an answer to a question. Having children is an answer to a question. Los Angeles is an answer to a question. So I'm belaboring this point for a second. Punchline coming.
Yep.
So if someone wants to get ahead in the media world or music or arts or entertainment, LA is an answer to that question, right? Houston, Texas is not an answer to that question. Houston, Texas would be an answer to other types of questions, but not that one.
Yeah, like oil.
Oil, right? So it's really important. So what's happened in the world is we've equated things, even consumption, is an answer to a question.
Right.
We would hope, right, America, that predicated on freedom, giving one the opportunity in pursuit of happiness and liberty, right? You think about those things: freedom and happiness and opportunity. That's what America was about. And what's happened is we've equated, if we get enough things, then we'll be happy. But it's left the world, in a state of despair. And I stated earlier, I only state what I know. If your listeners, this is an experiment that each can do on Google. If you go to the Google landing page, and in fact, Jason, you can do this right now. You go to the Google landing page, got to be the Google landing page.
Okay, sure.
And then you type in this. So about a year ago, I was curious, what are people interested in learning how to do?
Okay.
One would be like learning how to create wealth, right?
Okay.
Would be one thing. So let's type in, without hitting enter, to see what it autofills. How can I learn to?
Oh, okay. I get it. That's good. Yeah. How can?
And what's the number one? How can I learn to?
Okay. Sing, love myself, code,
Bingo.
meaning computer code, speak Spanish,
Yeah, but wait, you
type
already hit
faster, draw, play the piano, code for free, do the splits, play guitar.
Yeah, but it's the second one that's the really critical
love
one.
myself. Yeah.
How can I learn to love myself?
Yeah. Right.
Now wait. Now here's another. Type in, why do I feel so?
Okay.
Type that in. Why do I feel so?
We didn't think we were going to get a psychology session out of this, but this is great. Why do I feel so? And here's the answer. Tired, And number 2, alone. 3, bloated,
Right, those are,
weak, empty, sad, hot, nauseous, cold, depressed. That's it.
right. Tired, by the way, is a euphemism for depression.
Yeah, I agree. Mostly.
And so now I'm saying this isn't a lesson. This isn't an idle lesson in psychology.
Yeah.
Your listeners are interested in growing their wealth. And it's important they understand that that's what's going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that we're dealing with a world that has gone into debt to buy things they didn't really need and have left them indebted and feeling depressed and lonely and empty. So this is what's going on right now is a radical reshift, recalibration, and everyone's going, wait a second.
I'm glad.
What do I need?
I'm glad you said that. Okay, so here in my pandemic investing presentation, a lot of our thoughts just mirror each other's. This is really interesting. I have predicted that this recovery, when we wake up from this, we are going to wake up to a much smaller economy. And the reason is that 70% of our economy is based on consumerism. And I think people have really, truly changed. I think they've reevaluated their priorities. They are going to seek a simpler life. And I think a lot of this has been good for us in some ways, because a lot of people, I think, including myself, are really thinking about what is life really about? It's not about showing off a driveway full of overpriced cars. It's just not about a lot of this crazy stuff that we've all been doing. It's definitely still about financial freedom, but it doesn't have to be about massive consumerism trying to fill a void. There's a real centering, I think, that's going on, and I think a movement toward a simpler life.
I could not agree more. It's not surprising that you and I mirror each other. We come at it through different lenses and arrive at the same point.
Yeah, right.
And I could not agree more. And now the challenge in the world is that people are gaining enlightenment about really what matters. Mm-hmm. If each of us look at what we've done in the last 10 to 12 weeks, we've narrowed down the number of people we see and reach out to. We're thinking about how we spend our time and with whom. And product purchases, we're thinking, do we really need another one of those?
Yeah.
And no, actually, we don't.
One caveat to that before you go on that's kind of interesting is that people are spending on the home. The home has really become the center of the universe, and I think that trend will continue. People want to have a nice, comfortable home because they're stuck in it so much, and they're afraid they might be stuck in it again. So they are spending on home exercise equipment, furniture, home office equipment. I've definitely been spending more on my home. Okay, because this is where I'm spending all my time,
Right. I didn't say we weren't spending money.
Right.
Do we need another one of those things? And right now, you're exactly right. What's gone on is money is shifted away from external spending. We're not going out to restaurants. Mm-hmm. So that means we're going to, and doing things socially. Global tourism is 10%. Got to let that land.
Wow.
Of the global economy. 10%.
Yeah, that's big.
That's gone. That's just flat out gone.
Yeah.
So the global GDP just from tourism, that's gone.
So that'll take $8 trillion or so away from the global economy, right? Because it's about an $80 trillion GDP, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
So what's gone on is a reshifting of where we spend the money. So, for example, clothing. We don't need lots more clothes. We're not going out as much. And we can rewash the things we have. But we are, creature comforts at home, that's where we're spending our money. We're not going to Equinox Gym. We're going to buy a Peloton. Right? And by the way, Peloton stock was getting
went through
crushed
the roof.
before COVID.
It was getting crushed, and now it's through the roof. I know.
Right, through the roof. And so there were lots of things. You look at, anything involving work at home or play at home, stay at home, has done extraordinarily well. Anything related to commercial business activity has gotten crushed. And so airlines, they've gotten crushed.
Right.
But Zoom meetings, Zoom stock, ZM,
did
or
really well.
Microsoft right? Anything that a technology that allows you to do things at home,
right,
or interact, right, distance from at home, right? Like Zoom meetings, like, or anything involving doing things at home, whether it's exercise, entertainment, living. So you're right. Things like Lowe's and Home Depot, people are spending a lot more on home improvement.
Right. Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Swimming pools. Okay, we're not going to go out.
We don't want to go to a public pool anymore. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right? A number of these trends were in place before COVID, and COVID has just accelerated them.
COVID has accelerated everything,
just accelerated so much. And so you're right. Of course, people are spending. It's a shift. They're not spending it outside the home. They're spending it inside the home.
Yeah.
And, right? So life inside the home and anything that allows us, to reach out of the home via technology, those companies have done extraordinarily well.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting talk. I could talk with you, Adam, for 3 or 4 hours quite easily. And you're an interesting person. You got some insights. Wrap it up for us with any closing thoughts, maybe something we didn't talk about already, whatever you want to leave us with.
Well, I think the key thing is this. I've spoken about this theme since 3.5 years ago when I was with Tim Ferriss. And back in 2016, I said, pay attention to things that don't make sense. And that's true internally when you yourself, as an investor, your listeners, right? So each individual, your listeners, when you yourself go, that's odd, or you hear a commentator or some political or corporate or some expert on something say, that's odd, that anomalies are signs of enormous opportunity. And instead of just going, that's strange, and forgetting about it, go, that's strange, great. That's $1 million opportunity or more. And so whenever things don't make sense in your environment, or you hear others saying it, they are blind to what's going on. They go, that's strange. Wonder why that stock keeps going up. So again, things that, or something's going down, doesn't matter. It's a sign of something hugely powerful. Get in on it.
Good. Yeah.
Things
good
that
advice.
Don't make sense.
Very interesting, Adam. So watch out for those things that don't make sense. That's counterintuitive, but it needs to be considered because this time it really is different. I think we've agreed on that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff. Adam, give out your website.
I want to thank you, Jason, for giving me the opportunity. I try to share what I know about the world freely.
My pleasure.
And so my clients, more detailed information, hedge fund managers, different, but such wisdom I have about the world and insights I'd like to share. If they go to IamAdamRobinson.com, I share a lot there.
Good
and
stuff.
Twitter. Again, I am Adam Robinson.
On Twitter?
Yes,
okay.
Both.
Excellent. Adam Robinson, thank you so much for joining us and happy investing.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.